Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to provide too much of a preamble for the next panel. It's literally a response to Tim's presentation, and perhaps an opportunity to ruminate over some of the more controversial things that Tim obviously can't speak about, and maybe a chance to unpack some of the things that are already in the public domain. But before I call up the panellists, a little quick bit of housekeeping. You'll have noticed the venue staff have started to bring out some catering items and so forth. Today's a working lunch. We've deliberately curated it this way. We're going to have something to eat during the sessions. This is actually, and we've cleared it with the panellists, and they'll get the opportunity to have a bite to eat as well. But this is deliberately done so that we can get through the content as we want to, but also we're going to allow an opportunity for some networking after the event. So you'll be able to take that opportunity as well to chat with colleagues and others in the audience. So with that, I won't go into anything further other than just ask that response panel to join me on stage. As I call you out, please make your way up to the stage. Gail Connolly, CEO of the City of Parramatta. Tessa Knox-Grant, Principal, Australasian Sustainable Transport Leader, Arup. Larry McGrath, General Manager, New South Wales and the ACT for McConnell, Dowell, and the Provocateur today will be Andy Lovatt, New South Wales Pre-Contracts Manager, Rail and Transport, John Holland Group. Ladies and gentlemen, join with me in welcoming your panellists.
Hello everybody, I hope you can all see me over the lectern. I know I'm not very tall, so that's hopefully quite good. Look, I'm delighted to be here on this panel. I'm a rail engineer, so I hope you're all as excited as I am to be talking about high-speed rail on this wet Friday afternoon. So just to kick things off, any initial thoughts about Tim's presentation? Shall I start with you, Gail?
Sadly disappointing. From the City of Parramatta's point of view, I agreed with most of what Tim said, and Tim and I go way back, and he's winking at me. But he knew this was coming. All the things he said about building cities and putting opportunities for economic development, et cetera, advanced manufacturing facility, all of that belongs in Parramatta. Stopping stage one at Sydney means there's no opportunity to do half of those things that you had on your pretty little slide that said a high-speed rail project should generate. So stopping stage one in Sydney is old-fashioned. It's putting a stop where the old CBD used to be, not where the current CBD, the geographic CBD of Sydney is located, which is Parramatta.
Larry?
Thanks, Andy. I'll try not to put a foot wrong again. Thank you. I'm here all night. I suppose I'm slightly more positive than Gail about high-speed rail, but not necessarily from a Western Sydney perspective. I mean, how many times have we talked about high-speed rail in so many different iterations? I have a theory that the best projects get announced and then cancelled and then re-announced in some other form again and again and again. Because when you actually look at the projects that we've delivered over the last, let's say, 10 or 15 years in New South Wales, they're all projects that this has not been their first time around the circuit. The M4 East is now WestConnex, the North West Rail Link is now Sydney Metro, light rail in the CBD. These are all projects that we kept coming back to, and we kept coming back to them because even when they got cancelled, people went, oh yeah, but the benefits of this project are actually quite extraordinary. And high-speed rail to me is the ultimate of those, and that's because it is really transformational and it is really hard. Now, personally, I do think the stop should be in Parramatta or Sydney Olympic Park. My view is I think we've managed reasonably well for about 120 years or so with one railway line between Western Sydney and the city. We're coming up building another one. So I really like the idea of maximising West Metro as much as possible. But I understand there's a whole business case process that has to go through, and I'm one of the 20 people in here that are not involved in that, so I have absolutely no idea what those numbers say, and I'll leave that to Tim and others.
Tessa.
Thank you. What a great topic. and to get a bit of conversation going. I am also a bit of an optimist. As a transport planner, I need to be, because these, a lot of transport projects take a really long time to plan, deliver, and realise. And often the big, important, transformational ones, even more so. I like to use the comparison, and we've, with some other, big transformational stuff that has taken decades to talk about and is getting a bit of delivery action now, and that's the airport in Western Sydney. And I think, like the airport, high-speed rail is more than just a project, which is something that I always bang on about as well. It's the opportunities that come along with it. I think the real opportunities that we have for high-speed rail, wherever it goes in its first stage, are the sort of nation-building corridor benefits to really give us the opportunity to compete globally. And we've been hearing all morning about the importance of connections and the opportunities that creates by bringing people closer to jobs and places and each other, about not just the economic benefits of job creation, but housing affordability and the importance of community and allowing people to spend less time commuting and more time at home, and giving people opportunities about being able to take up employment because it's easier to get around and to access those opportunities. So I'm a bit of a big picture person and a bit of a long-term sort of aspirational kind of person, but I think it's really important that we get the planning right and that we really ensure that we keep the advocacy really strong. So this needs to happen. And as Tim said, this is not a link. It's a big deal. And while I would love it to come to Parramatta, I think it needs to connect to more than one part of our metropolitan city, and hopefully it will. But it's not going to succeed on its own in the first little section. Like the opportunities for this thing are when it realizes its full vision, and as far as I'm concerned, whichever little piece it takes to get it stacked up to actually happen is what we need to build that momentum.
Thank you. So, as you say, we need connections. We need to make sure that everyone benefits from this. How do we get state, local, and federal politicians all working together to achieve the best outcomes? Gail, do you have a view on that?
Well, City of Parramatta, obviously local government, the level that's closest to the people, we have an excellent advocate in our Lord Mayor, Councillor Zeta, and one of the first things he did after being elected as mayor was to put up a Lord Mayoral Minute and advocate for high-speed rail, which shows, yet again, that local councils can always punch above their weight. We may be considered the lowest level of government and the forgotten tier, but we are the people who are most impacted by this. The feds and the state can build things, they walk away. We deal every day with the people who access these transport systems, who need the jobs, who want to be located next to the station, who want to get on the train and travel to Newcastle quickly. Local government is always underestimated, and I look around the room, I see Lindy and others here. It's not like it was 30 or 40 years ago, where we were always told what our place was and we were put in our place. We don't have a place now. Our place is at the table with the two other levels of government as influencers. And of course we can work together. Parramatta has demonstrated that. If it wasn't for us advocating for light rail years ago, we wouldn't have light rail in Parramatta. Because it wasn't something that the state government or the feds were pushing for Parramatta. So of course local government has a role to play, and we're working with Tim's crew now, trying to push him around a bit to get the business case to include Parramatta in stage one, but not only Parramatta, out to the airport. And local governments have been advocating for an airport in different guises over the years for a long time, because once again, the decisions that are made by other levels of government are the ones that we are left to deal with. We are left to manage it every day. So, of course, we need a seat at the table, and we are an equal partner. And that's what I always say, we're an equal partner. We're not just the guys you invite at the end when you've got a spare seat. We need to be on the VIP table.
That's good. Tessa, Larry, any other views on that?
I think all I'll say on that is this is not going to happen without local government support, without all levels of government support. And it's also not going to happen quickly. So, you know, I think Lindy mentioned the councils know the communities the best, and the communities are the ones who are going to make this happen because they're going to be advocating for generations and many years and decades ahead to keep all elected officials, you know, local, state, federal, accountable to make this happen, because this thing is going to require investment over through multiple property and market cycles and multiple political and electoral cycles. So the local communities are the ones who need to keep pushing for this, and for that to happen, they need to understand the benefits and see the benefits. That, you know, I think too often these big projects ignore the impacts on the local communities. And it's not just about, you know, traveling from Brisbane to Melbourne, whizzing through your local community and you know, impacted by the noise and so on. Or you suffering from unintended consequences of, you know, property prices around your station going up or something. You know, we really need to ensure that the jobs are created, the local benefits are realised, and that the locals really do benefit from it, and that the staging is done in such a way that the benefits are realised throughout the various stages of the project. It's not just something that you know, suffer the pain of now, because too often we see that. We see the consequences of the problems during construction, and those people are never going to realise the benefits in, you know, 10 or 15 years' time or longer. So we need to ensure that the benefits are far more transparent and actually meaningful for the people who are being impacted.
Great, thank you. So looking at Slider, one of the questions is, high-speed rail's been investigated many times in the past 2 decades. What makes this time different? So, Larry, I know you've been involved in some of those previous investigations. What's different this time?
Yeah, well, I think there's actually a lot of things that are different. I think one of the really positive differences this time is it's not being considered as this sort of global amorphous Brisbane to Melbourne kind of network, and with an unclear starting point. So I think being really clear on this is the area that we're going to focus on to start what will be an eventual network is a real positive. Even the fast rail work by the state government still I felt was too broad in its last iteration a few years ago. So picking one area and focusing on that is a really positive thing. Look, I come from the construction side, so one of the other things that I find really positive about this is a focus on being actually realistic about how you would build something like this, particularly to the Central Coast. You know, we live in a basin in Sydney, and there's been, I would describe it as sort of this snake oil of faster rail that kind of comes out every now and then when someone tries to make up something that you know, they say is going to go really a lot faster by just easing some curves and that sort of thing, which has tremendous problems because people tend to live in those curves between railway lines, and also the travel time savings that you end up saving just aren't significant. So, you know, being really clear, and we're very fortunate in Sydney to live in an area where tunnelling is efficient and effective. So I think those things are all real positives, and I really like the way that the authority under Tim is also thinking about how to deliver this in a more big picture way and do things differently in terms of major infrastructure. I would say one of the things that does rely on is having a clear pipeline of other major projects that will sort of tie in around high-speed rail, and I think that is a bit of a grey area in Sydney at the moment.
Yep, thank you. So one of the top questions from Slider about the role that PPPs make in making high-speed rail feasible. The previous panel talked about value capture a little bit and funding opportunities. Given the scale of high-speed rail compared to metros, do we think there's any opportunity for different funding models, or how we could assist the federal government in funding it? Any views on that?
I think that we should stop calling the High Speed Rail Authority the High Speed Rail Authority and start calling it the High Speed Rail and Cities Authority. Once you introduce more emphasis on, less on the transport mode and more on the city shaping ability of this piece of infrastructure, and Tim did go over all of those other benefits very well, but once you start talking about the other things that this transport system brings, then you'll get different players come to the table, because let's face it, everyone's happy to invest in property development off the back of a metro or a high-speed rail. That brings the opportunity, if you're creating cities at every stop and there's a government oversight, that brings the opportunity for different investors, different international investors and different types of consortia who may not be attracted to smaller projects. So you're getting a global influence if there is city shaping and it's legislated alongside this mode of transport. And I think it has to do both things. So if you went to the market with a high-speed rail authority that was also responsible for planning and building cities, your PPPs or JVs or whatever sort of funding model you want to explore would look very different. And I think they would attract global players. But if you're just going to go to the market with the transport system, I think your opportunities are lower.
Tessa? Oh, sorry, Laurie, you go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I very much agree with that. I think, you know, when you look at the cost of doing a network, let's take Central Coast as an example, a lot of that cost is the capital cost in the actual tunnels. You're probably not going to bundle them into a PPP. It just would be way too large. So then you're looking at, you know, the operations of the network or that kind of thing, where yes, you can mount an argument for why that might be appropriate, but it's not going to defray a huge amount of the capital cost. Might help the government with cash through the delivery of the project, but then they have to account for all of the payments as soon as the project opens anyway. So it's certainly, I would not say a PPP would be a silver bullet to a high-speed rail network. I think that the better way to look at it would be, would there be a way of tying the private sector investment into a project like this to get better precinct outcomes and potentially better operational delivery outcomes without unnecessarily tying the hands of government for the future extensions, which, you know, would be critical.
Tessa?
Yeah, I would just add to that by saying one of the clearly this is the kind of thing that we need, you know, multiple funding streams and investments, and we need to demonstrate the value for why would people, you know, benefit from whatever. Various funding opportunities from, and certainly thinking of it beyond a transport project, but all the regeneration opportunities and land uplift and so on. But I think we need to ensure that we're providing some certainty of government commitment of some level to then give privates the confidence that there's, you know, this is going to be a thing for them to get some long-term benefit out of. And there are lots of opportunities in different ways in how things could be packaged, but I think it's really ensuring that you're giving it a proper long-term view to allow it to still realise the vision you need to throughout the economic ups and downs.
Yeah, thank you. So we heard a lot about the extensions to Sydney Metro in the previous panel, extending further to the west. So do we think that, given funding and market constraints, it's possible to do that at the same time as high-speed rail? And if not, what should take priority?
Well, they do two different jobs. High-speed rail, as I said before, is a city-shaping, nation-building project. I sound a bit like Kevin Rudd there. But it should be nation-building. One of the earlier questions was, what's changed? What's different? Well, the country's grown up, you know, and we now have far more global cities or emerging global cities than we had in the two previous decades. So that's my first answer to that question. But metros do very different jobs to high-speed rail. You know, metros connect within regions or within metropolitan areas, for example. High-speed rails connect interstate, and they have different functions. They perform different city-shaping services, and so you do need both, and they do need to be funded differently, and they do need to be staged and delivered. And hopefully the various authorities are talking to each other as part of that time frame. But when you've got an international airport in Western Sydney, and you're looking at transport systems that connect within that region and also beyond to other states, then you have to look at them both separately. What is the job of each of those systems, and then as a combined approach, and then you determine your funding. And this is where the state and the feds need to work together. And as I say, I think there's a piece of legislation around this to deliver it successfully. So my view is that, yes, they can both be funded and delivered at the same time if there's coordination between federal and state.
Larry, do you think does the market have the capacity?
Yeah, the market definitely has capacity to deliver extensions to the metro that have been mooted and the high-speed rail network that's been discussed. And that's because you've only got to look back a couple of years. We were delivering, 3 metros effectively at the same time in Sydney, WestConnex at the same time. The market is cooling off. I actually think the more difficult question to answer is, could you deliver a high-speed rail network with those metro extensions and the energy transition projects that we need at the same time, and the water projects that we need across Greater Sydney? Because what is happening to a degree is a lot of the capacity in the transport space, as you well know, Andy, is being sucked up into energy and water, and other jurisdictions like South Australia. So you certainly need to look at it as a holistic picture, but it's no question that the infrastructure market is in an overall decline over the next 10 years or so. So there's latent capacity there. And there's certainly latent capacity in areas, specific areas that would be required in the early phase of a high-speed rail network, like TBM tunnelling, where at the moment we stand to lose our capability in New South Wales that we've built up over the last 15 years as these metro projects come to a conclusion.
Yeah. So Tessa, Arup have done a lot of work on international high-speed rail projects. Is there any lessons we can learn from overseas projects, both good and bad?
Yeah, I think we recognise and we have opportunity now, as you say. High-speed HS1 in the UK opened almost 20 years ago, and I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about the benefits we want to realise, we can now learn from that. So, how do we identify pretty early on that we're not just building a transport project, but there's really that place-making imperative and the necessity to involve communities really early on. How do we ensure we providing those proper connections that we know we need for a global city? And I mean, just on the previous question, we've got millions of people here, and the city continues to grow at a phenomenal rate. We need more than 2 or 3 metro lines and some bus routes and a light rail and an airport. There's a lot happening here, but we need that to continue. Someone mentioned earlier, this is the start of the conversation, not the end. And we've really got some momentum in this space that we can grow with and run with. So there are lots of overseas opportunities to learn from. And I often hear the comments about, Australia is very different to the UK. Well, yes, it is, but there's some learnings from California around, sustainable development and how do we ensure that the stations have those, are designed in ways to have lasting benefits around sustainable construction methods and ensuring that we're providing those opportunities for people as economies and jobs transition and change, and those kinds of longer-lasting social benefits. So there's some real learnings that I think we are very mindful of and are grabbing onto.
Thanks. So we're running short of time a little bit, but so fairly briefly, where do each of you think high-speed rail will be in 5 years' time? So Tessa, where do you hope high-speed rail will be in 5 years' time?
Well, I'm hoping that we're talking about not, is it going to happen and is it a pipe dream, but kind of how can we make it happen quicker than it is? And we'll be having conversations with the other states about which is the second or third leg that needs to come up, and is it Brisbane or Melbourne who wants to be more quickly connected to us? I think, and maybe everyone in the room, including Larry, will be involved in the high-speed work. But no, I think there's a real opportunity. It'll be good to start. What I'd like in 5 years is for people to realise that this is actually a real thing, and it's not something like the airport. Oh, we're still talking about it. It'll be nice to kind of get past the scepticism and actually start realising the benefits.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years is a long time. I hope that one of the things that happens sooner rather than later is that people realise that it is actually affordable, because it is. And although it's got an enormous price tag, we have built many things over the last 10 or 15 years with enormous price tags. And high-speed rail is not out of that realm between Sydney and Newcastle to some crazy degree. It's really not. It's within the deliverability and affordability of the types of projects that we have been doing. I hope people realise that sooner rather than later. And I hope we see all the jurisdictions that need to get on board of something like this to get on board, because it really does require a passion and vision from multiple jurisdictions to actually achieve it. And I think if we do that, then it's just a matter of getting on with it. And I would say, Tim's sitting here, and Tim has a pedigree of being able to take projects from the conception of an idea into delivery. He's proven himself pretty good at that, so I hope he gets the chance to run with it.
Thanks. Gail.
I thought you'd never ask, Andy. 5 years' time, we will have a piece of Commonwealth legislation that establishes the authority as a rail and cities authority. It will preserve corridors, so we will have done all of the planning work to make sure that the corridors for the future route are preserved. They will have been identified by Tim's crew, and that would have been done because all three levels of government will have a seat at the table. In fact, Tim will second people from local councils and people from the state government to be permanent members of his high-speed rail authority, so we have guaranteed input into the legislation and the corridor preservation. And finally, Parramatta, because Tim will have put in the DA, and we all know how long DAs take for advanced manufacturing facilities, Tim will have lodged the DA for the advanced manufacturing facility in Silverwater, and Parramatta City Council will have quickly processed it, and we will be up and running with the manufacturing facility. Thank you, Andy.
Great. Thanks, everybody.